Testing. I feel like I could hear the feedback. It's almost. Anyways, let's get the clap started.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Awesome. I'm gonna take a drink
Better
real quick right now.
Yeah.
Just in the beginning.
That's in the show, though.
That's straight. All right. Okay, so Joey, tell us about your pick this week.
So my pick is THX 1138. Kind of a strange title. I wonder why it didn't do so well at the box office.
I think the 1138 really added to that.
I love it.
Really? Oh, well, I'm not saying I dislike the title. It's just like whenever I'm in the film, I've never remembered the 1138. I don't know. Right now, I do.
Oh, really?
Like after you said it, but like I just refer to him as THX. And
Oh, sure.
I wonder if that's the reason for that. Like like that in our childhood, that like THX thing. They go like, whoa.
No way.
Really? Is it? I don't know.
I don't know. That could be. I never thought about that.
I was thinking about the entire movie.
Oh my gosh, bro. I bet it totally is.
I wonder if it's like George Lucas's company or maybe earlier. I don't know.
It's
honestly.
like a sound company. George Lucas loves the the technical stuff, so I could totally believe it.
Damn.
But anyway, so the movie came out in 1971. It's a sci-fi movie starring Robert Duvall and other people. I don't know their names. It's a sci-fi movie about kind of conformity, dystopian future, and it's about people who are regulated in their emotions by certain drugs, and then it's about two roommates that they come off the drugs and they start to have emotions, they start to fall in love, and then the government's like, that's a terrible idea, and then shenanigans ensue. So how did you feel about it? What were your overall thoughts?
I thought it was pretty interesting of a world to explore and a dynamic to examine, especially Robert Duvall, and his performance was really good at understanding a character who kind of wants something that he can't even understand yet. I guess he kind of understands it, but he doesn't like know where or how to get it, and just like moving forward in a very almost monotonous but relentless way, I think is the best way to describe it.
Okay.
What did you think?
Well, but did you like it or not?
I mean, yeah, I liked it, but we can get into criticisms maybe later on in the talk before we open things up. I have definitely a handful of criticisms to give, so I would give it like a mid-level. I enjoyed it.
Pretty good?
Yeah.
I think that's pretty similar to me. I probably liked it a little more than you, but also like I might have fallen asleep for like 5 to 10 minutes.
If you didn't say it, I was gonna say it.
I mean, we gotta bring it up. The elephant in the room. I was tired. It was a long day, and whatever. It was just the ending. That wasn't too important, was it? I didn't. But I understood the story and everything. What a great podcast! What a great movie I picked. That I fall asleep to. But I thought it was good. It's George Lucas's first movie. It's his directorial debut, and I thought it had really strong direction. It might have copied Kubrick a little bit much, but I thought it was very strong. If anything, I felt like the story itself was a little bit haphazard. But overall, I liked it. I thought it had an interesting kind of atmosphere, interesting vibes. And it's just those like kind of 70s sci-fi movies that I just fall in love with. It's just a personal hobby of mine. So I think that bias kind of leads me to like it a little more than you.
Yeah, well, I'm the resident hater here, so I'm like, fuck 70s sci-fis.
Fuck
Stanley
old
Kubrick.
movies,
Yeah,
dude.
honestly.
Why would you watch a movie before 1990?
Hey, I watch movies before 1990. I just don't enjoy them. I'm just kidding.
Who makes you? Who makes you?
Film classes? I don't know.
I make you.
Yeah. No, but I think
once in a while.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to make you watch a 70s movie. It was the backup movie
to Tusk.
No. Oh yeah, it was the backup to the backup movie. But you know,
Yeah,
it was a movie I wanted to watch for years. So
yeah, and I think you're right in that directorial debut has like a strong direction from George Lucas, and there's a lot of aspects from this movie that I saw him like experimenting with that he would later use in a very perfect way in the Star Wars franchise. And I thought that was really interesting, at the very least, to study and observe a person who is working on a concept that they just aren't able to perfect yet, especially with the story. And I think that is my most biggest and most egregious thought that I had with the movie is like the story. Otherwise, visually and acting, I felt like it's really good. Sometimes the music was a little bit much for me, but I kind of expected that from like a 70s movie, especially like sci-fi or horror, or like a mix of the both. There's a lot of those like crescendos that I could sometimes do without, but you know, sometimes they're used to tense effect, you know.
It can get kind of hammy, you know, like the way that they kind of go into it, especially with this movie. This movie's a little hammy. I think you'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Like every once in a while they take something so seriously that shouldn't be taken that seriously. It's not as smart as he really thinks it is. But visually, like you were saying, I think it was amazing. I actually thought, like, there's scenes where he's in the prison. I think visually that was really good with the white on white.
Yeah.
And a lot of times with those ubiquitous colors that it doesn't really blend all that well, or like it can get kind of dull. I didn't feel that way about this movie at all. And I felt like it felt like a 70s movie. So it was kind of hampered, a little bit dated, but I felt like it wasn't too dated. Like, as far as what it could have been and how much it cost, it wasn't too dated.
Yeah, I mean, George Lucas pushed a lot of things with the Star Wars, so this is almost like him pushing it, but without as much resources or as much like expertise, you know. And so I thought it was really impressive as a directorial debut, because I wonder what he did before this, because if this is his first movie, he probably had a large part of the budget pushed into like special effects and that kind of stuff, like the holograms and then the outside world. I was amazed that it would be utilized that much in this film of its era. You know, it reminds me a little bit about the one with, I forgot what it was called. Was it RoboCop? No, the one with what's his name? He was the governor of California.
Arnold's Total Recall.
Yeah, Total Recall. Yeah. I was expecting like a almost Total Recall type thing where things kind of look almost like a Star Trek special effects type thing, you know?
Yeah.
But this one I feel is definitely more impressive, and I think it stands above from its time. And I think in addition to that, I feel like the ending also was a unique factor that interested me a lot, and kept me at least somewhat not like, oh, I guess this doesn't have like an important ending or like a strong ending. Although maybe it's not like that strong in like entertainment value, but I thought at least it had, it was interesting to see it end like that.
I was excited for it. I was awake during the very end. So I saw the very ending. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't. It was very short where I was asleep. I was trying so hard, but the ending, especially the ending shot, I thought was beautiful, and him climbing out up the ladder. Very good metaphor, obviously. What was like your favorite part? You know, like what kind of aspect of the movie that struck out to you? Stuck out, not struck out.
I really loved when they first got into the, you know, the expanse of white that he was imprisoned in, technically, before he just started walking, you know, towards a direction or whatever. That almost in and of itself felt like a totally contained like short film.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of like the various metaphors that it could play with in this sort of setting. And I think some of it George Lucas was trying to imply and employ with the atmosphere and the set being all white and that kind of stuff. But also I felt like sometimes maybe the rest of the movie's answers almost hinder that little portion of what he's trying to say. And I guess, for example, it's, for me, it's almost like a projection of like society's overthinkers, I guess, or like society's emotional aspects
Yeah.
in that tiny prison cell, I guess, and a separation of the intellectual mind versus like the emotional and like manipulative mind, I guess, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and they had a lot of illusions. It felt like Orwellian in the way that, I know everyone just throws that word around, but I really felt like it was this time when he was, having reconciliation with the corporate head. It's just like a picture of a guy.
Oh yeah.
But it's very much religious undertones, using religion to keep people under control. Is kind of the idea that they were going for, which I thought was good. Definitely good for that time period. I thought that was really good. And also, kind of the setting that they had, where like controlling people, like that figure felt like a big brother. In the sense of 1984. So there were a lot of allusions to that, and it felt like it took a lot from stories from the 40s and sci-fi stuff.
Yeah, definitely all the times where they're like, especially La or Luh, she was just like, they're watching us or whatever, and he's like, nah, man, they're not. And then
No way, dude.
I kind of love
us?
the artistic like surprises sometimes that he throws in. I almost missed that in Star Wars, although it's like definitely more cohesive of a story. But like the whole aspect of whenever she's like, I think someone's watching us, and he's like, nah, and then it zooms out into like them on camera, and then it just has all these people like turn and look at them from like one side and then on the other side.
Yeah.
And it definitely made me feel very like observed in that moment, and like almost vulnerable as they are,
No, and it's also crazy like to see what they're watching on, like the technology. You ever like you watch like an old movie and you see what they think the future is, and you're like, that's insane. Like you're like this is such a shitty future. Like these computer monitors, this is like before the internet, you know? Like it would look, we know it would look so different now, even though we don't know what it would look like for sure, but
yeah,
it's
like
just
144p.
yeah. It's just like total shit video quality. But no, it's, and also I like the idea that everything people say about the future or the past is actually indicative of what they think of the present. And this, it being 1971, it was a very tumultuous time. So it was a good time for this to come out. I know it bombed, it didn't do very well, but it was very timely.
Yeah, I thought so too. It almost reminded me of whenever you're saying your view of the future is like what you view the present is almost. It gave me like a more director and in power type movie than like any type of 70s sci-fi, especially because he had a hand in writing it too, or like the stories by him, but he had.
You thought it had more of a hand than like Blade Runner or Alien or something?
Oh, that's true. Oh, yeah, I guess. Sometimes I have mixed feelings about Blade Runner, the original, I guess.
So do I. But the original Alien, though?
That's true, but I feel like that's definitely more on the horror side, or like the or pure horror side, and then this one definitely ponders more of the Stanley Kubrick like 2001 like cerebral horror of like.
Yeah.
So I thought it was strong in that sense, and it almost reminds me of like the story of Dune, not necessarily the movie, but just like the fear of like galactic imperialism. This is almost like George Lucas's fear, and it kind of makes me think about like him as like a, I don't remember, or I don't know how old he was when he came out with this movie, but it really gave me this like young adult energy and like what they're afraid of. And it's so funny that it's like, damn it, I'm not gonna have sex in the future or something like that.
That's what he thought of. He was just one night he just like his girl
They're
wasn't
gonna
answering
out.
the phone, and he was like, you know what? Like life sucks. I'm gonna write about this, bro.
Yeah, they're gonna fucking outlaw sex in the future,
Yeah.
man. That's what I think.
It's gonna suck.
Yeah.
No, but it's kind of cool to see all of these like legendary, like I guess we can use quotations. Nah, I mean they're legends. Like George Lucas, these kind of older directors. Have you heard about like the kind of director Rat Pack in like the 70s?
No.
Like the one, so George Lucas, Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, and Martin Scorsese were all like really close friends, and they all hung out every night and talked to each other about film,
Damn.
especially during the 70s. So you got George Lucas making 71, Spielberg does Jaws in 75, Scorsese probably, I think he gets started in 69 with Raging Bull. I want to say that's 69, but I could be lying. And I have no idea when Francis Ford Coppola's first movie was. I don't even know what it is. But it's kind of cool to see how they grow together as artists and friends, and how their styles intersect with each other,
Yeah,
because they all have such different directions they go in.
Mm-hmm. That almost reminds me of me seeing Spike Jones in Jackass today.
What the? He was in Jackass?
Well, he didn't do any of the stunts. He was like, whenever they pan over to like everyone watching, I saw him
Oh
once,
my
and I was
gosh.
like, "That's Spike Jones."
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah, and it's hilarious that Spike Jones is friends with, I think it's Johnny.
Johnny Knoxville.
Yeah, Johnny Knoxville. I think it's Johnny Knoxville, but I might be wrong. But yeah, that's definitely really interesting that all of these legendary or like classic directors were bouncing ideas off of each other. I don't know if like the other, if not the actual people, the films that were coming out around that time definitely influenced George Lucas in this one.
Yeah.
I think more so than he's like healthy almost, you know. It was interesting as a like cerebral story, but I definitely felt like the atmosphere was emulating like a lot of Alien and that kind of stuff.
It came before Alien.
Oh,
just to be
okay.
Clear. But
Okay.
I know what you mean though, because it does feel like, especially with Kubrick, it feels like a lot like Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
And 2000, 2001.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As opposed to like his later works, which is Star Wars, and that seems unique and basic at the same time. And I think if we were to get into criticisms soon, then that would be, if you can believe it, a criticism that I have is that,
Unique and basic.
well, Star Wars was unique and basic.
Yeah.
And then this movie was not that, but in like a bad way. Whereas you can do it in a better way. This one did it almost like in a little bit worse way.
Yeah, I know what you mean though.
Uh-huh.
It's strange because he has George Lucas, for the record, he's directed 6 movies. 4 of them are Star Wars movies. 3 of them are the prequels. So let's throw out the prequels really quick.
Yeah.
He's got this movie, and then he makes American Graffiti, and then he makes Star Wars.
Uh-huh.
And it feels like he slowly gets more original as they go on. He kind of finds his voice that way. But I
Yeah.
totally agree with you that he doesn't. It's not like it's unoriginal. Like, I've never really seen this idea before, but I've half seen this concept before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the idea that emotions aren't, like, if you take emotions out of human beings, what do you get? It's kind
Yeah.
of a classic sci-fi thing.
Yeah.
And I don't exactly fault him for that, but I know exactly what you mean, where it's like, you know, the execution could have been better.
Yeah. And I think that it's almost hard to criticize because it's almost like there's a luck base to it, in my opinion. Like, this movie was trying to be a little bit more creative with its storyline, but like basic in the way that it emulates the other film's atmosphere. But like Star Wars is being basic in the way of the storyline, but like builds a lot on the world and like the characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I was missing from this film, is that almost human aspect of the need to escape or fight a resistance in that sense, you know?
Yeah.
He has a motivation, yeah, but it's almost difficult to separate it from being like, oh man, maybe this guy's just horny or something, you know? He's like off his meds and he's just really horny. And sometimes he would go through things and I'm like, man, are you really that horny? Like, my guy.
He's down bad, bro. He is down bad.
Like, immediately once he like passed out, he woke up and he's like, oh, I'm just gonna like touch the fuck out of you. And I'm like, I understand. Like, I guess it almost emulates like this. If you don't touch a person or you don't feel the need to touch a person, it like builds up. And then when it like finally released, he was just like dams open, you know?
Yeah.
But I'd honestly imagine it more in real life being just like, oh, I'm getting slightly more adjusted to touching someone, not like, all over them immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, my point is that like his motivations are almost really hard to tell. And that hindered this film more because it was just this guy's journey towards something we didn't know, so we didn't have this end goal to understand where the story is going. It's not, I don't, avant-garde, I guess, enough to be like a collection of moments story. And then his character wasn't likable enough and the motivation wasn't there enough for us to really be interested in every mundane thing that he did. Even though, I guess it wasn't mundane to escape, but he's running away from cops that walk towards him. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and he was like, it makes sense because they don't have emotions, you know? Like, that's a concept behind the movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it can be a detriment if you're not paying attention to how, you know, you have to really hone in on their motivation and where the story is going to go, because the characters aren't really going to take you there. Like, the characters, like Robert Duvall was very good in this movie. It wasn't like my favorite performance of his, but he was definitely very good. But most of the other characters, and even him to a certain extent, it wasn't like they were incredibly memorable, right? I mean, they were just, they were vessels for the idea of what the movie was trying to say.
Yeah, definitely LUH, I feel. Like, felt like her character would be more involved in the film, I guess. And I almost thought she was, like, the main character, especially in the beginning, because she is the one that breaks out first, which we never really know or knew how. Almost gave me a, like, is it called, like, The Fifth Element? So the one with the
movie,
orange hair.
The one with Mila Djokovic, yeah.
Yeah, that one. It almost gave me that kind of vibe where although that film has its own problematic ideas, but like she's just like almost the main character of it, really. And I thought that would be how this film would explore that character, I guess. And her being minimally involved adds an interesting aspect to the film that goes nowhere. And I feel like that's a lot of how I feel about this movie. That there are interesting choices that give me like I'm not expecting the female supporting character to just disappear for like half the movie. But like, what does that lead to? And then it doesn't really lead to much, I guess.
Yeah, and there's sometimes where movies do that and I appreciate it. You know, where they know what I want and they're like, I'm not going to give it to you.
Yeah.
This movie, it didn't feel quite like they were doing that. It kind of felt convoluted sometimes. And while it worked on some level, it didn't hit a home run, you know?
Yeah.
But I thought it was good, and a lot of times I like it when films do that, so I appreciated it. But yeah, I know what you mean though, especially with LUH.
Yeah.
You know, she should have been in the movie more. She was like a big character, and I feel like it would have added if she was in it more.
I think the most egregious and easy to see example of that is their use of like random numbers in the dialogue. Like I definitely felt like
Really, I liked that.
Really?
I actually liked that. Okay.
Okay,
sorry.
we get okay. This will be in a disagreement then. I feel like, from my perspective, there is an interesting amount to use numbers and future jargon to explore how efficient communication would be in the future and almost put you out of the dialogue to show that these humans are like acting very like robotic or acting very like efficient, especially the efficiency that is pushed in this film and like being under budget and all that kind of stuff, you know. But there is, to a certain point, for my opinion, that it just adds nothing more to the film and it becomes this vessel for George Lucas to shoot shots and have us watch things that go on when we don't understand anything that they're like working on, you know, or like ideas that they're floating to each other in an efficient or normal way. It just gave him like an opportunity to show a shot, you know, almost to say lazy writing in that sense.
I mean, I can understand that for sure. I appreciated the way that they approached kind of that idea. I like how they were built as numbers and how robotic they were, and they constantly had machines and androids and stuff working with them, and they were treated the exact same as humans. You know, they weren't treated differently, and humans were treated as androids the entire time. And I liked the way that they basically tried to work through, like, how can we make this as efficient as possible? We need to eliminate emotions, pure binary, and that kind of stuck with me because the way that they went for it was they swung harder than I've seen movies ever do it before. Like, only speaking in numbers to that amount, to the point where it gets confusing and convoluted. Like, that's kind of interesting actually to me. I enjoyed seeing that because it gave me something new. But I do understand what you mean. Like, you can make that a cop out. You can definitely make that a cop out. But I feel like his the way that he went all the way, I felt like that was something to be commended.
No, I understand that as well. I feel like there's this sort of underlying need to subvert his style almost, that I guess got more under my skin, in the sense of, like, I feel like George Lucas is a really good artist that works with like hero's journey, regular story type things, and it's almost like he rejected his own talents in that sense, and to not reward the audience is like going against him, in my opinion. And so that
You should see American Graffiti, though. I think you'd really love it, and it's kind of a blend between the two. But anyway.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that might be on my list then. But I guess there were two ideas that he's trying to fight against in this movie, and I felt like that with a lot of the other aspects of it, and that kind of adds to the non-reward type thing that I was talking about. In what I mean is that, like, in the efficiency of their talk, it's trying to push this corporate efficiency narrative that he's trying to push. But then in the actions of the robots that are chasing him, it's almost this relentless kindness that he's pushing, you know? And so the first thing is that, like, you don't really understand much of what they're saying, so eventually that gets really boring, especially in like the 70s type graphics type era.
Yeah, that's
you know?
true. Yeah, it can get boring for sure.
Yeah. And then the fact that it doesn't translate into viable strategies that the police are using to capture him they just kind of walk. So it's just like watching this huge complex efficiency matrix working for these guys to continually walk slowly at this guy, you know?
You know, that's something I didn't think about before, how Big Brother's supposed to be like this all omniscient being, but it almost felt like they weakened it a little bit. It shouldn't have been so weak. They should have, I feel like they at least should have caught him really quickly and have him escape again or something like that.
Yeah.
To show that, like, it's a very efficient and important system and it deals with these things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't look like they did that. It looked kind of haphazard, you know. It just felt like they weren't really, and you know, his prison mate that he escaped with, the only reason he got caught is because his car wasn't starting.
Yeah.
Like, and that's a real thing that could happen, but it definitely wasn't them that got him.
Yeah.
You know, like they just stumbled into him.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So,
And I think that idea is what makes it a little bit harder to get invested into the story, because it's almost tiptoeing between the two, in the sense of like he's trying to push this inevitability of human nature if they're not drugged or something to go exploring. Even when he's making the police, he doesn't want them to be aggressive. They just want, almost to argue, maybe they actually know what's best, and he just has these emotions and he's going up there and he actually will die, you know?
yeah.
But then you balance that with trying to make the whole future really, really efficient and like fast and moving and that kind of stuff. The ideas just really hit each other, and that's what I mean by his ability to explore and maybe it just being luck. Because I almost really like this film because I admire more of what it's going for than Star Wars. But the way that Star Wars, the pieces that he liked and that he worked on in that film, just almost luck based, just worked a lot better in like the social zeitgeist that everyone was going through. And even now, you know, because it's a classic story.
Yeah. No, I mean, everyone takes from Star Wars. You know? And it makes sense because it's a classic story, so it's something that actually, as far as storytelling goes, I think Lucas is not a good storyteller, or he's not a good writer, in my opinion.
I
think
agree.
Star Wars is very basic, to say the least. I think he is the best, arguably one of the best world builders of all time. Visually, as a director, he's one of the best of all time. He's a genius. But storytelling has never really been much of his thing, you know? Like, you talk about the prequels. Obviously, the stories are horrible.
Yeah.
Star Wars is a great story, but it's a classic story. There's not too much that he has to do extra for that story, other than the pieces around it and the visual parts, which is why I feel like it works for him so well. And this movie had so many great ideas, like you were saying, but it just suffered. Like, it suffered not constantly but consistently with finishing what he started. You know, like certain things with the perspective being on Robert Duvall the whole time, I did think that was interesting, but I wish it was written a little better, you know? Like, the idea that you're kind of with them where you don't exactly know everything that's going on, but the jargon slows it down or something like that. Like, you just kind of get bored, and it's convoluted for maybe for atmosphere. I liked the atmosphere a lot, to be honest, but at the same time, it slows down the movie, and it slows down everything else. And there's certain things he brings up in the beginning that he doesn't come back to, like we were saying. So it's constantly just a little bit muddled. So I guess, you know, that's kind of the story with this movie.
Yeah, I think it is. And yet it's so close that it's so admirable, and I think that's my takeaway from this film.
Yeah.
I think to do a comparison with Blade Runner 2049, like arguably my favorite sci-fi movie of all time, it's almost laughable how much more interesting if you could just flipped some simple stuff, you know? Like with Blade Runner 2049, he starts off as a replicant, and it's about finding humanity where none is expected, you know?
Yeah.
And then whereas this film is like finding out that there is humanity in you when you've thought that there isn't. And that small flip of it makes it really hard to connect with that character. Experiencing Kay's violent outbursts of emotions as a person who's not supposed to have any immediately connects me to him, whereas a person who has emotions, like a human that has emotions that he's repressed, was a lot harder. And I thought that was really interesting maybe to dive into.
I think that's a great comparison. Like, that's an incredible comparison because it's very similar. Ryan Gosling's character and Robert Duvall's character are very, very similar in that they have no emotions, or they're not supposed to have emotions, and they start to feel emotions.
Yeah.
Even like it being a human who's emotionally repressed, it's, you know, at the very basic level, it's the exact same journey almost, right?
Yeah.
And Blade Runner 2049 does it much better. I think you would agree with.
Yeah.
Because they're able to put some sort of heart and humanity in it that I didn't see in THX, and the world and the story are more interesting than THX, and it's more condensed, and it's not as convoluted. Like the world around him really elevates what he's going through, as opposed to THX, where I feel like the world is interesting, but it's not how can I say that? It's in it. The world is a great idea, and the execution of it, as far as what you're showing in the story, it fell a little flat, right? But I think, that's a great example.
Yeah. I think that it's almost like a piece of, child's toy where you put the triangle in the triangle and you put the circle in the circle.
Yeah, go on.
I'm just coming up with these similes all over the place, man. But for a world as like bleak and static as it is, the story just didn't fit the visuals, and George Lucas's visuals are very like human and like expansive, I guess, and a very singularly focused character is just not something that kind of fits together with that, in that film. And yeah, just that tiny flip of just things. People are a lot more inclined to find gold in sand than to like dust some sand off some gold,
Yeah.
So it's like that human emotion that like comes out in Robert Duvall is just like something we expect humans to have, and that it's like a play on expectations. And THX, the movie, is almost like one step too far on that reliance that the audience is going to follow you emotionally,
Yeah, and I think also, if we're still comparing them, which I think is apt to this movie, so I thought Ryan Gosling's performance was better than Robert Duvall's. Robert Duvall, a classic actor, and he's given world-class performances. I think he's probably a better actor than Ryan Gosling. But in this movie, I don't think that was the case. I think Ryan Gosling gave a much better performance, and that could have been due to the direction of George Lucas, but there was just certain parts where Robert Duvall was falling a little flat. He had good things going on, but he just, I don't know, something wasn't connecting. And I know he's got that in him, that kind of emotion to tell a whole story with just your eyes, even if you're technically trying to figure out what emotions are. Actually, let's stick with that. Actually, I feel like his journey to figure out what emotions are and how they're impacting him should have been more conscious. It should have been more focused on that, and it felt like it was going on, but it felt like it wasn't given the attention that it deserved, and that's the heart of the story, dealing with that emotional journey and the actual discovery of what emotions are and how they impact you and why they're good and why they make us human, is more important than the story and the world and all of that tech jargon that he spends so much time on.
Yeah, I think that is what I was trying to say with the shapes analogy, but you just like explained it in such a better way than I did.
Well, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know where you were going with the shapes one, so that's good.
Yeah, that was what I was going for. But to tie it back, that is the fact that it's like a very character study type film, focusing on this one person experiencing emotions for the first time. It focused a lot on world building that George Lucas likes to do, but that character study theme of the story doesn't fit with the direction of constant world building.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say almost.
Definitely.
And surprisingly, you could say that like 2049 has both, but I don't know.
It really does. I mean,
Yeah.
they have Roger Deakins.
Yeah.
We can talk all day about 2049. In fact, I'm surprised at this point we haven't done an episode on it.
It's just too good. I feel like it'd
At
just
some
be one of those things where we just gush over it the whole time, and it's not that interesting
It's
to anyone.
worth, we can break down how awesome it is. We're
That's
kind of
true.
doing that a little bit right now.
Yeah.
but I know what you mean, though. I do think we'll do it at some point, though.
Yeah,
I
for
have
sure.
a feeling it'll be 1 week, and you're like, I don't know what movie I'm gonna pick this week. And
Time to
then-
watch a 3-hour 2049.
Yeah. It's so easy to talk about it because it's so good.
Well, another thing that it does better, if we're continuing this thing, is the supporting characters. I was very disappointed in LUH and the hologram. I felt like the hologram
Yeah.
was almost the most interesting character that was introduced besides Robert Duvall. And I expected him to almost be with him all the way to the end. It was this person that chose to do differently. I guess you could say that's like, what is this, SCT or SEC?
What?
His friend, the dude?
Oh, I don't know, but the guy, his
Yeah.
friend, the guy who's talking about leaving, getting out.
Yeah. I feel like there's definitely there could be evidence to say that he also chose to stop taking his medicine and all that kind of stuff, but it almost felt like the other people who were crazy in that white room were like people who just kind of went insane,
Yeah.
And when he met the hologram, he was cognitive, he was smart, he made decisions and that kind of stuff. It almost emulated Robert Duvall's character, and I was interested to see how the hologram came out of, or like how did it get a physical body, because I was like, is it gonna be like him just like walking through stuff the whole time? But no, he get hit by things, and I'm like, okay, where's your physical body? But his endeavor to like leave and find something more, he was also more vocal, so it almost emulated Robert Duvall when he's like sitting there staring, about his desire to experience more things and learn more things and not be kept in like bliss, I guess, or like a routine. And yet they took him out really quickly as soon as he was introduced too. And him and LUH, you could say SCEC or his friend's character is like a little more explored, but he wasn't as interesting as the other two. And so you really had to follow Robert Duvall this whole time. And while K can be like very, very stone and hard, you had people like
Harrison
Anna
Ford.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Ana de
Ana-
Armas
yeah.
is the first person I would say on the list.
and Ford
Harrison Ford.
Yeah, Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford, yeah.
I just got a brain fart with the Henry.
No, yeah.
And then even like the police chief, I forgot her name.
She was great,
Yeah.
too.
And that just kind of...
Jared Leto was very good also.
Yeah.
As much as like people hate Jared Leto for good reason, he was perfectly cast for what he was doing.
And so you could see people with emotions bounce off with a person who's not supposed to have emotions. And in this one, he was missing those characters. And the only other one that's by him for most of the film is one guy that you're like kind of weirded out. And I'm like, is this kind of... I'm just trying to say that he's gay, maybe, with him being like, hey, I want you as my roommate. I got rid of everyone. I just want you, like, be my roommate. We be good together,
Well, and I really thought he was a plant,
Oh, okay. I didn't think that.
Wasn't he watching him on the screen before?
Oh, yeah.
I think he was a plant from the Big Brother, whatever, the government.
That's true.
Trying to keep him out of stuff, I guess. But, that kind of got convoluted, too, because, like, he was just talking about, hey, let's get out of here. We got to start a revolution. I was like, where are you going?
This guy's baiting him.
What's going on with all this? And now we're actually leaving with this guy, and I've expected some sort of payoff with that they never gave. It's just like more examples of interesting ideas as well, like starting with the hologram as well. Interesting ideas that just don't get finished. And I think that's a big part of this movie.
So all in all, though, I feel like we have been talking a little bit about our disappointments and the comparisons with Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah,
but
we appreciate this movie, but also here's the big list of what we hate about it.
But it didn't make me angry. See, that's the thing. I much prefer ideas that don't pan out much more than things that try to be really deep but ultimately are like really simple explanations, or like questions that are asked but not answered, rather than questions that are asked and answered in a really shallow way, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I feel like this movie, it really swung for the fences, He really tried to create a movie that was his vision. It felt like it was a movie that excited him, and it was a movie that didn't lack new ideas. As much as we're talking about, we had a whole thing where it wasn't fully original, like we'd seen some of it before, but there were a lot of aspects that I felt like George Lucas really like gave it his all. Like he wasn't half-assing this as far as
sure,
like imagination goes, as far as like the thought that went into it. You can just tell he put a lot of thought into this, and he really made an effort to try.
His thought and his effort, I would say. Like, the building blocks that we see in this movie go on to translate in a much more seamless fashion in Star Wars. And I would almost imagine that those aspects wouldn't have been as nicely executed if it wasn't for the ambition that this film had. With that, though, there's definitely this angstiness that I felt with the film, and like I said earlier, like I'm not sure exactly what age he was, but it displayed this creativeness that even if this was his first film and I was there to watch his first film, I would be critical of the film, but I would be interested to see what he would do next.
Yeah,
and I think that's like the best description of it.
Definitely. It felt like it just felt like you could tell he made exciting decisions. He didn't go with he didn't go with decisions that everyone would have made. Like, at least he had a very large collection of great ideas that didn't work, as opposed to a large collection of bad ideas that were executed well. Like, even if they are executed well, which actually I'm kind of tripping. not really. I think Star Wars didn't have any bad ideas, but like it's a less. I'm not gonna compare this movie to Star Wars. Star Wars is better than this, but like. What like it just felt like he had a collection of great ideas that weren't executed well, as opposed to a collection of bad ideas that were executed okay. Like if you can execute on a story that's basic, that's cool. But if you're actually bringing new ideas and new concepts and interesting kind of avenues, that does more for film and more directors. That can be influential all of a sudden.
Yeah. The first person that comes to mind that kind of emulates that to me is referencing one of the films we did a couple weeks ago, which is Yorgos Lanthimos and The Favorite.
Oh yeah.
It gave me a very, not the same vibe, not the same story or anything like that, but the same potential that you could feel when you're watching Dogtooth, in my opinion. And I know there's people who say that that's his best film, but to me there were very interesting ideas that were executed in a way that didn't give the payoff or the emotional response from me. And yet the ideas were there. And although Dogtooth could have even been my second or second film that I watched from him, but most likely it's third, that I could see from then, and from all his subsequent films, you see that translate to just a better story or a better idea or a more expert level of execution,
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to put it, and I think that's why George Lucas got better as a director every time he made something. For the first three movies, prequels, they don't count, but they're technology-wise, they're actually brilliant.
Yeah.
But that's kind of his foray always, is the technology side.
Yeah. Like you were saying earlier, I feel like he's not that great of a writer. So to base his film on something more archetypal and then building the world from there is where his expertise goes. And whenever it deviates from that is where his mistakes are.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if he's come out or plans on coming out with any more films, but I think that is, if he ever watches this, that would be what I would tell him.
Oh yeah, George Lucas. You did pretty good, man. Leave it to us to tell you.
I'm the critic. Okay. This is my Ratatouille story.
Yeah, I'm sure you are very interested in what we have to say. Yeah. George Lucas.
Take notes, man.
You are one of the 12 people that will watch this. Yeah. It's amazing that it's 12, though. It used to be like 4.
Yeah. I'm watching it steadily grow. That's awesome. But yeah, I guess even when you play to your weaknesses, if you do it with ambition and with creativity and with follow through, it's admirable. And I think that's what I took away from this film, is it's a very admirable effort, unlike something like Belle that we watched recently.
That's true. Belle, the anime movie,
we did not like it.
Super unoriginal, but kind of original, but not really, and also visually bad. And whole bunch wrong with it from a talented director. So
yeah.
That's our little review, probably.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'll come out with a full rant one day, but I say that in almost every podcast. I'm like, hey, watch my next episode that I release.
Yeah, watch Josh's YouTube channel. It's going to drop at some point.
One day, yeah.
We'll get there. I'm excited for when something comes out. If your first video is a rant about Belle, I bet it gets at least 100 views.
Yeah, there's so many things I want to say about it, but...
Also, though, I want to show you American Graffiti at some point.
Okay.
Because I think that will change your opinion on George Lucas entirely. Because he works entirely in science fiction, except for American Graffiti. And I think that's arguably his best movie. Mm-hmm. Really, it's a coming-of-age classic. And the story is better than any of his other movies. I mean, the Star Wars story is great, but it's unoriginal. Like,
Yeah.
I think Star Wars is actually technically his best movie, even though it's so popular. Like, I think it's one of the examples where it's actually deserved. But I'd be interested to see your thoughts on American Graffiti, and it's been a while, so sometime on the podcast.
Not next week.
Maybe after
Not the week
Saint
after that.
Tango.
Yeah.
After the 8-hour movie, but yeah.
Yeah, that's all. Those are my final thoughts on them.
Okay. Well, I think actually we have very nearly the same opinion, which happens a lot. I feel like I think we need to argue more. I don't know.
We just talk about Dune.
We're way too aggressive.
I was about to tie it back to Dune, and then I was like, oh, wait, but directorially, Joey doesn't really like Dune.
I
like,
never said that. That's not what I said. I said I wouldn't have nominated him. He wasn't
He
in my
didn't like
top
it.
5.
He didn't like it.
He wasn't my top 5 of the year.
He thought it was trash.
That's like 5. He's like 7 or 8. I don't know. Like, it was good. It was very good. All right. Well, I think that's it for me, too.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, peace.